And so Sandy, I don't know if that now has a little thing to click yes or okay on.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. All right, so again, just in terms of protocol and process here, I'm looking at a picture of the whole of you there in person. And so if you have a comment and I don't happen to see your hand go up or something, just yell out my name or say, I'd like to say something, and I'll get to you, okay?
Great.
Okay, so Ecclesiastes chapter 11. I want to say a few things by way of introduction here. So this chapter is a string of proverbial statements. It will read a lot like the book of Proverbs. Some of these statements feel like they're related to each other. Some of these statements feel like they're completely unrelated to each other. Many of these statements are drawn from nature. And so that's one of the things that they have in common. They come from the simple observation of how the world around the author works, especially the natural world. Because these are proverbial statements, the way we interpret them, the application we give them is fluid. That is, there's no one right way to understand and apply these things. So in one way, they're like mini parables. They have layers of meaning, layers of application. I'm sorry. One of the themes here is certainty and uncertainty. Another theme is joy. And so we'll follow those two themes through many of these proverbial statements. The fact that many of these are drawn from nature means that some of us may have difficulty relating to them. They may be a little challenging to understand. One, because we live more urban and suburban lives than the author and the readers did. And also because our theology tends to minimize creation theology, which is what wisdom literature like Ecclesiastes is based on. And so Craig Bartholomew, in a commentary on wisdom literature, just notes that for people like us who live urban and suburban lives and who have a theology that does prioritize Christ, but doesn't make much use of creation, that proverbial statements like these can be a little challenging. I'm going to read just one summary from Craig Bartholomew in his book, Old Testament Wisdom Literature. So he's talking here about how in the ancient Near East, Israel, Egypt, Mesopotamia, all had a high value for nature and wisdom that grew out of nature. So he writes, Old Testament Israel had this same embrace of the old sense of harmony and wonder. Like her ancient neighbors in Egypt and Mesopotamia, Israel lived in close touch with creation. Just think of the repetition of the Genesis creation stories in Hebrew homes and the countless psalms that sing of God's work in the skies, seas, earth, animals, and crops. Not only did these cultures live in touch with creation, but their religion was also woven into their view of the world. Israel was unique in that it saw all of the creation as coming from its God, Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth. To live in this world that God has made is to live in communion with its maker. To touch the soil and breathe the air and watch a cloud is a religious act because all of creation matters to God. And to hope for salvation meant a renewal of the human race with the world and all its beauty. So I hope that maybe one thing that happens for you just by spending some time in chapter 11 this morning is just a renewed appreciation of creation, and that this week you might pay more attention to what you see in creation. Okay, just a couple more statements here. These out of the Bible Project. Proverbs, like the ones that we're looking at, exist in almost all human cultures. They're typically passed down to us from previous generations, and that's likely the case with our author. By definition, Proverbs come from wise, thoughtful people who've condensed their observations on life into short, clever sayings that ring true to our own life experience. Many people have paid attention to how life works and the patterns of cause and effect that flow from our daily decisions. In this sense, Proverbs come from previous generations who are passing on their wisdom. Simply put, Proverbs have a generational authority of human wisdom based on human observations. So Ecclesiastes feels very much like that, someone who's looked at all of life, observed how life works, and is now telling us, hey, here's some truth to pay attention to. This feels different from the Torah or the books of the prophets. The law given by Moses on Mount Sinai is God's revealed will for Israel. This is where we get the thou shalt nots that come directly from God. It's a divine covenantal authority. The prophets also speak with this kind of authority, but rather than giving commandments written by God's hands, they communicate the words, thoughts, and purposes of God in a thus says the Lord manner, a common phrase in prophetic literature. In comparison, the basis of authority in the wisdom literature is markedly different. So authors like the one in Ecclesiastes, especially here in chapter 11, are saying, this is what I observe in nature. This is what I observe in life, and this feels true for me. Okay, so let's just jump into these. We're just going to take them one by one and consider their meaning. So Ecclesiastes 11, verse 1. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. So it may mean something a little more to you if you think about this image. A cargo ship on the water. Those cargo spaces filled with maybe not bread, but products, commerce. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. So the allusion here is probably to ancient business, ships on commercial voyages filled with bread and other goods, might be long delayed before profit resulted, and yet goods still had to be committed to them. And so the author is observing, this is how life works. We take our goods, our commerce, we place them on ships, we cast them out into the water, and we have to trust that despite all that might happen on those waters, they will arrive safely at their intended destination after many days. He's obviously not just making a comment here about commerce, but about life with God. And so one author says that in this statement, we find several elements that we might think of in terms of our life with God. It's a life of trust and adventure. Sometimes we have to cast things out, we have to let them go. onto the waters. It's a life of total commitments. We have to take our bread, the things that mean the most to us, and let them go. This life has a forward quality to it. You will find it's something that's going to happen in the future. There's some uncertainty about the present. And it's something that requires patience. After many days, we may find that it reaches its intended destination. All right, so let's stop for a moment and just kind of think about that. Can you think about some ways in which, in your life as a believer in God, you've had to cast something that was important to you? You've had to cast it out on the waters, trusting that in some way it was going to achieve its intended purpose or reach its intended destination. And in the meantime, there was patience involved and some amount of trust and faith involved. This is where you get to talk.
Chris, good morning. This is Eva. Long time ago, I decided to leave my work, very well paid job, go full time to school. I was in my 40s and I went back to college. And I was in class with the 18 years old. And I left this high paid job not knowing how the next few years gonna be. And very shortly after I left my job, my husband was laid off from work. And so here we are with good salary to almost nothing. And every day I cast my trust in God and proceed and persevere and hope that what I am doing will produce the result. And sure enough, with struggles, and I graduated from college, my husband found another work, and the several years with this uncertainty and patience and perseverance, we came out with the great results of that. So that's what I came to mind, that, cast your bread upon the waters of the unknown, the vast water of unknown, and waited many, many days for the result. But that's my experience, how I see it. Thank you.
That's a great story, Eva. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Does anyone else have a? Oh, Yi?
Yes. About 5 years ago, my office is the condo complex. About 5 years ago, there was a unit that came for that I ended up in the market. So I bought it I was going to fix it and rent it. At that time, we had lost passport office in our town. They have discontinued the service. So I was fixing it to rent unit, and for some odd reason, as I was driving, I had this crazy idea of using the office, put the office at the service of the community for this passport service, but I didn't want to do it under my agency, and I created this A plus. Ask me why I cannot explain. I did it, and 5 years later, I can tell you now, the degree of satisfaction with a lot of headache, but the degree of satisfaction I find in that union, I'm not getting it down out of, but being at the service of my community, is probably one of the greatest reward. Me and my family and my close friend that supported me, actually there was at the inauguration, and I think with all the headache that caused all the disturbance in my life, I find great satisfaction, and this is probably one of the examples.
Thank you very much, Guy. We'll see this theme sort of woven through some of these other proverbial statements. So I'm gonna jump to the next one here. Number 2, verse 2. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth.
Chris, this is a prophecy of Wall Street. That's just a diversified portfolio.
Yeah, so it does seem to be drawn from the world of trade or commerce again, because you don't know what's going to happen on earth. You don't know what disaster may happen. Therefore, give a portion to 7 or to 8. This can be seen as sort of a pessimistic view of life. You don't know what disaster may happen on earth, but it's the observation of somebody who has looked at life and knows that, well, sometimes really challenging things happen. And so it may be a reference to commerce and the investing of certain things while you're able to do that. Some view this as a reference to philanthropy, to generosity. Basically, be generous as you can, and giving a portion to 7, even to 8. Be as generous as you can when you can, because something could happen so that you're no longer able to be generous. So there's sort of a sense here, whether we're talking about trading or commerce or philanthropy and generosity, the sense of do what you can while you can, because things in life change. You don't know what's around the corner. We're not sure what tomorrow will bring. And therefore, do what you can while you can, whether it's trade or commerce or philanthropy or generosity. Take advantage of the moment. And so this could also be referring to opportunities. Take full advantage of the opportunities that are at hand, because they may not always be there. So it's not necessarily a pessimistic view of life, sort of a doom and gloom. The author is not saying the sky is falling, but he's just saying, look, if you have the opportunity right here to give a portion to 7, even to 8, go ahead and do it, because you have the opportunity now, so take advantage of it. Okay, so let's stop and think about that. This idea of living in the moment, taking advantage of the opportunities in the moment. Does that resonate with you in any way? How might that connect to your life in any of these areas of commerce or generosity or opportunity?
You just said that. Okay. So I see this a little differently. I see this more as talking about how to be part of a community. And last week I taught my students about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the motivational model. And the third set of needs that all humans have is for love and belonging. And I think that sort of goes to what you were saying, that when you have your sort of physiological needs met and then your safety needs met, then you can become a functioning part of a community where you're able to give and to receive. And it's like what you were saying, that it's not like disasters can happen. Disasters will happen. That's almost a guarantee. And there are going to be times where the people in your community experience disaster. And you want to be in a position to be able to help those people. And then when disaster strikes you, those people are going to help you out to fill those, you know, physiological and safety needs. And it also, you know, the next, sorry, I don't mean to like do a whole lesson on this, but the next need is esteem needs, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about other people, how other people feel about us. And it's sort of like a circular reinforcement that, you know, when we can help people through their disaster and they can help us through our disaster, it keeps building that community, it keeps building those relationships.
That's a really good insight. Yeah, I think sort of reading this in community. So in a community, there may be some people who are in the midst of that disaster and others who are not. And so it's our opportunity then to give a portion to 7 and to 8. And then when the tables are reversed and we find ourselves in disaster and others don't, then they can give a portion to 7 and even to 8. Thank you for that. All right, let's jump to the next one here. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. So some layers of interpretation across scholarship here. Some understand this to be saying basically that God's plans are relentless, therefore carry on regardless. And so the clouds and the trees representing God's plan. God's plan is for the rain to fall. His plan is for the tree to fall. There's nothing we can do about that. So just whatever will be, will be. Others look at this out of the idea of generosity. So the clouds are giving rain. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves. Therefore, we should imitate that generosity. And trees fall down to the south or the north. We may fall down. Our destiny is eventually to die. We can't change that. Others interpret this much more literally. The author's saying that you can't control nature. The clouds are going to do what they do. Trees are going to do what they do. And so we should prepare for the worst. This one and the proverbial statement of verse 4 are joined together. They all come out of the world of farming. And so there's the mention of rain and wind, and then wind and rain. If we put 3 and 4 together. The first picture, clouds full of rain, a storm with heavy rain, and then violent wind. And then the second idea here, the tree falling, is the tree that gets uprooted, maybe from the rain and the violent wind. The point is not that the tree couldn't be moved, but that its fall couldn't have been anticipated. The sudden fall of the tree contrasts with the gathering storm clouds, which can be watched with apprehension. And so 2 points: mankind cannot control the difficulties of life, even when he anticipates them, and because they're often totally unexpected events. I think basically what the author is saying here is, look, rain is going to happen. Trees are going to fall. It's just a part of life. And we just have to live with that reality around us. Sometimes it's going to rain. Sometimes trees are going to fall. It's just a part of the cycle of life, and we have to live within the midst of it. How might that statement help you in terms of the perspective it provides on life? It's going to rain, trees are going to fall. Live with it. Is that helpful or not?
Well, Chris, it's Dale. We've talked about this in the last few weeks, but the notion of anti-fragility, the notion of you can't eliminate uncertainty, but you can be a person who not only survives uncertainty, but even finds a way to thrive through uncertainty. And I think that really fits in with what the writer is saying all through here is you can control some things, but there'll always be something that slips out of your control. You can't keep uncertainty from happening. You can become the person who knows how to live with it.
I also think that maybe there could be like a sort of inferred metaphor that, like, it's like what Jesus said, you know, I'm gonna take care of the flowers in the field. Why would I take care of the flowers and the birds and not take care of you? We don't really have as much control in our lives as we want to think, just like the clouds don't have control over whether they're gonna rain or not, and the tree doesn't have control over where, you know, when and where it falls. Neither do we. We don't have any control over when we're going to die and the things that happen to us sometimes.
But we have a guiding star
Yeah,
that we can follow to get through all this stuff.
right.
I say this in the very literal way. The rain, the clouds enter the sun, the earth. That means the earth is full of rain. Flowers will grow out of this, and for me to enjoy it. And the tree will fall, and when it decays, and the ants will eat, and the ants will eat. So it's a like cycle of life. You know, it's not just the end. It's one thing ends, another begins. And in our life, there's sometimes quite often when we think of that the worst thing happened, it's like when one door closed, another open. And so if we look at this from the positive point of view, rather than, oh, it's a disaster, it's just a matter of different perspective, how we see this. Or I quite often hear people say, when it's raining outside, people say, oh, it's a terrible day. And I usually say, no, it's a rainy day. Not a terrible, you can make it terrible, but it's a just rainy day. So
Yeah.
just a perspective.
Good, thank you. Those are all really helpful comments. All right, I'm going to move on here. He who observes, I'm sorry.
Chris Hedlund had his hand up.
Who did?
Okay.
He's a little too small.
No, I was just gonna say that it's kind of reminds me, you know, something my college roommate said when his mother died, my sophomore year, his junior year. And I remember, you know, we're in school, he's you know, bawling his eyes out, you know, we're trying to console him, and a few weeks later, you know, we have finals, and he, you know, comes out of finals week, he comes out of this whole thing, he comes out of school, and, you know, a few months later, he's like, you know, completely, it's almost like he's a completely different person, you know, he's doing phenomenal in school, you know, all this other stuff. And I remember approaching him, and I was like, how are you not just still in this position of, you know, despair and distress and depression? And he said, look, there comes a point in time where you've got to, like, things happen. Things are going to happen. And he was Christian, and he was like, you know, I believe that she's up there with God. I believe that I'll see her again. Like, this is not the end. I have to keep pushing. I have to keep going. And, you know, I believe this is kind of what he's saying. Like, you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing. God will have your back.
And Chris, this also reminds me of something Maya Angelou said, to find the rainbow in your cloud.
That's nice. Yes. Thank you, both of you. Those are great comments. All right, verse 4. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. So the suggestion here is this seems to be about procrastination. Faced with an erratic wind, he who observes the wind, and weather, he who regards the clouds. The farmer is not to wait for a more propitious occasion to sow his seed. So the picture here is of a farmer who needs to sow the seed so that he can reap the crop, but he's hesitant because he's looking out there and he's observing the wind and he's thinking, well, maybe I should wait for a better day. Or he sees some clouds and he thinks, well, maybe I should wait for a better day. And so the call is for activity rather than inactivity, that the life of joy is not going to come to somebody who wavers. The only way to sow and reap is to go ahead and do it, even if you're not entirely certain that it's going to work out. So sometimes we wait for ideal conditions, or we wait for an end to uncertainty before we act. And what the author is calling us to do here is to do the opposite, to not wait for the ideal condition, to not wait for an end to uncertainty. But even if there's a little bit of wind, even if there's some clouds somewhere in the distance, go ahead and act. So it's a warning against procrastination or the need for having ideal conditions in place before we jump and do what needs to be done. Verse 5, as you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. So again, the theme of uncertainty plays out here, but now the imagery has gone from agricultural to the realm of the body here. And depending on which Bible you read, this verse can be translated a little bit differently here. Two major interpretations. One would be, as you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how bones grow in the womb. Or the other interpretation, as you do not know what is the way of the Spirit, or how bones grow in the womb. Or a coming together of those two here, which is what the ESV gives. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes into the bones in the womb of a woman with child. The Hebrew word ruah is used here. It's translated spirit in the ESV and other translations. And so that's where the challenge comes in. Is the author talking about the wind blowing, or is the author talking about the Spirit coming forth into the womb of a woman with a child? The authors of the ESV have decided that's generally what the author means, and many scholars feel that is true as well. So the idea is, and you can see how this would really play out in the ancient Near East, that there's a mystery. The author is saying there's a mystery about conception and pregnancy. No one knows exactly how that baby becomes a living, breathing being in the womb. There's a mystery about it, and therefore, the author says, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In other words, because there are things that happen in the natural world that we can't explain or don't fully understand, we can broaden that principle to say, well, there's something about the work of God that we simply don't know, and we have to be comfortable living in that uncertainty. And so certainly science has brought us to the point where we do understand a lot more about conception and the growth of a child in the womb of a woman. But there are all sorts of things that happen in the natural world that we look at and we think, how in the world did that happen? What in the world is going on there? And the author is telling us, take note of those situations, take note of those occasions, because they remind us that there's a mystery to the work of God. And we live our very lives in the midst of that mystery. And so as we encounter that mystery, we just know, well, this is part of the way that God works in the world. All right, one or two more. Verse 6, in the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, whether both alike will be good. And so the author is saying we're never sure which endeavors will prove fruitful. You know, should I go ahead and sow my seed? Should I withhold my hand because I'm not sure which one's going to prosper? And so the call is give yourself to the responsibility that lies at hand. Do the right thing, do the good thing, do what you can when you can, even if you don't know what the result's going to be. Even if you're not certain it's going to prosper, go ahead and plant the seed. Go ahead and do what you can, even if you can't guarantee its results 100%. All right, last one. We'll close with this one here. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So these images of light are used throughout the Old Testament to describe the goodness of life. So the goodness of life is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. It's a call to savor the goodness of life. To see the sun means to live joyfully, you know, to take in the warmth and all that life has for us here. These two words, sweet, like is sweet, and good or pleasant, are calling us to savor a life with all of its goodness, with all of its pleasure here. And so the author is sort of stopping here in the midst of all this uncertainty that is part of life, all of the mystery that is part of life. He's saying, and there are good things in life to savor, to enjoy. And so he's saying, give yourself permission to enjoy what can be enjoyed. Savor it, take it in, spend some time in the sunlight, and just enjoy the good things of life. You know, it reminds me a little bit of our dog Dasher. You know, now that the temperatures are warming up, he just loves to go out in the backyard, and he just sits there in the sun. He doesn't do anything. It's just like he's soaking in all of that sun. And that's the image that the author has here of just sort of walking out and just taking in all of the goodness of life, just savoring it and enjoying it, even in the midst of all the uncertainty and the mystery of life. Okay, we need to close there because John's going to lead us in prayer over any requests in the list. And afterwards, those of you in person, if you guys could take your chairs and put them in the closet on that far side of the room, that would be so helpful. So John, if you'd lead us in prayer, please.
If you pray with me, please. Our Father, Mother, our Creator, our great physician, our champion, our friend, our brother, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for bringing us together as a church family. We thank you for taking such good care of us. Our lives are just filled with your blessings. We ask you for help, though, for people among us who are attached to us, for Patty Cahill's mom, for Chris and Kendra and Eddie and Allison and Hannah and Scott and all who suffer with COVID, for Deborah Silkett, for Chris's pain in his hip, for Sheldon's mother-in-law, Kathleen Curry. Thank you for our church family. Thank you for the peace that we realize in the world. The care and protect. Please help us to be part of your care and protection for the earth. Kelly's mother's pain, and Sarah in her search for a new home for herself, and Max and Cece. Bring her positive results. And Father, fix our eyes on the horizon. Make us aware of your guiding star. Give us the ability to listen for your calling, the courage to act on it, the tenacity to wait for results, and enlighten us to share and savor those results when they finally come. We ask all these things through Christ our Lord. Amen.